Hey everyone, got a real treat for you this time. I'm actually going to be upgrading this particular computer. As you can see, this old looking case here, it's actually from the early 2000s, I believe 2002, 2003, to a newer Ryzen board and CPU, along with memory and all the other good stuff. This case has actually seen a couple of AMD generation CPUs you can see down here, but the sticker for the even CPU that I used originally back in '02 is actually missing, but it has been upgraded to a dual core and even the AMD 6-core FX CPU, which it currently is running right now. So I'm going to be going ahead and removing the board, CPU, memory, and even a dedicated sound card, and of course a video card, and pumping in a Ryzen board and CPU. I actually did review both the board and the CPU prior, so give you a little idea what we got in here. A very old school computer case here. And you can also see it's some very old school stuff, and power supply still on the upper part of the case. 80mm fans in the back and in the front. I believe there's two in the front. Sorry if it's a little too dark. But and also a Zalman cooler there, some DDR3 memory. The one thing that stands out here is actually the 1050, or I'm sorry, the NVIDIA 950 card here by Asus. There's also a little Sound Blaster Audigy card, PCI interface, so that's another old school card right there, though a really, really good one. And regular 500 watt power supply, 6-core CPU, 16 gigs of RAM. I'm not sure why this fan slot here is missing. But I'm going to go ahead and rip it out, put everything I just set in, probably even change the fans. Some of these fans are a little dusty. I'll go ahead and show you that whole process as well too. It's going to be a pretty interesting upgrade, putting a Ryzen CPU inside this whole case here. Almost kind of makes it hit the sleeper class, even though this is not a branded PC that looks really old. But it is actually a pretty old school case. The other side is same thing, also just solid. No tempered glass. way generations from that particular thing back in '02. And I don't believe, well, side panels with windows were already starting to come out around this time, but this one in particular is not. You can actually see this side panel does have a little slot for a fan. There is a fan here, but it's currently not used. And back then, for this particular computer that belongs to a friend of mine, and he still definitely uses it very actively for a couple of games and whatnot. I did put a little fan filter here just so it wouldn't look so, ugly or anything like that, just leaving it completely empty like a hole, or using just a little fan grill. That little filter will actually look better. So let's go ahead and start removing some stuff here. Over here we have the parts I'm going to be using. Ryzen 8-core 1700 CPU. You can see that right there. Sorry if I just bumped the camera right there. I'm going to be using the X370 board. If you're wondering why I'm not using the X470, I actually own an X470 and also a couple of 370s that I've given out to family members, and also I'm using on a movie PC and also a spare PC of mine, as I mentioned. If you want to see a review of this video or the X470, I'll go ahead and shoot some links down there. And this board's definitely dropped in price and even has some rebates attached, being that I really haven't noticed too much of a performance difference, but obviously the X470 does have further options. All you need is a BIOS update to get this to recognize second generation Ryzen CPUs and probably future ones as well. This one in particular has a sticker, so it's already ready to go. I went ahead and just picked this particular board out. It does have LED lighting and all the other good stuff, so I'm sure that'll make him happy. Though again, if you remember, this case does not have a side panel that's got a window on it or any tempered glass stuff. You probably won't be able to see, with the exception of maybe a nice little blur somewhere appearing back here. Might look kind of nice in the dark, actually. Got some DDR4 memory here from, I always pronounce them as Geil. Memory prices, from what I've seen and heard, are starting to come down. This is actually 16 gigs of RAM. Speed is, I believe, 3000. And I think I scored it for about 115, 119. somewhere about that. These memory prices been for 16 gigs of RAM been hovering around 160 or higher. There's a particular reason speculated why they may be coming down, but I'm definitely happy to see that for sure. Just like the video card prices have gone down, sort of. Actually, they have. And here's also a dedicated Sound Blaster card here that's using the PCI Express X1 interface. My friend mentioned that he wanted to stick to using dedicated sound cards just like he has here. So I'll basically be replacing that card there with this one here. I did go ahead and buy another one because newer boards such as this one in particular do not have regular PCI slots anymore. All now just PCI Express. The PCI slots are now just basically going away. Kind of like AGP, or even if you're very old school, ISA. That's another one. Was that the board? Yeah, it was like the, kind of reminds you of the old Super Nintendo cartridges where you used to connect them. So all this stuff's going to go into this computer. It's going to be really interesting. And I should probably boot this guy up and let you know how it sounds. Let's give this computer a little boot test. You can tell it's definitely a little loud. I did cheat a little bit, and I already gave this computer a nice little dust over so the fans actually look a little cleaner, particularly the CPU fan. I'm pretty sure the front panel fans probably are a little dirty, you really can't see them, but there's two of them there. And I'll go ahead and probably remove those and clean those up a bit. Might as well, since you have everything ripped out. I have to say I'm sorry I didn't actually record blowing the whole thing out, because some people actually find pretty satisfying seeing a very dusty computer case, having everything blown out of it and looking spanking clean to a degree, obviously. Oh, I just realized the power supply has its own little blue LED lighting in there as well too. CPU fan does as well. Zalman cooler, I believe it's 92mm. No, actually probably a little bigger. Could be wrong there. This little fan back here, very old school. There used to be a little label here, but after so long it's fallen off. So this case has definitely gone to a number of generations of AMD CPUs and boards. Probably some mixture of A-bits even back then. Some Asus, and right now it's using a Gigabyte board. I believe this is the 970 chipset, not the 990FX. Still PCI Express 2.0 slot, so I wonder if using a 3.0 slot will actually make the video card maybe a little more efficient, a little faster. But definitely the CPU change will be a huge difference between the 6300 6-core FX CPU by AMD to Ryzen. Moving down here, we just have two hard drives. One's a regular SSD drive, I believe it's 180 or 256 gigs, and a regular, probably 1 terabyte hard drive for movies, music, and whatnot. Standard setup that a lot of people do nowadays. Operating system and games and other stuff work here. Pictures, videos, and other whatnots going to the mechanical for higher space capacities. Very old school case. So another video of mine, I mentioned the possibility of upgrading from an older generation AMD to Ryzen. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. And in this case, it's going to be a Windows 7 machine that we're going to be basically upgrading without even reinstalling. A couple of things off the back that I mentioned in the video you should do is probably install some drivers, chipset drivers. Video card driver is probably not a bad idea, you can always reinstall it. And let's go ahead and start just uninstalling some of those once I find them. In this case, I'm just going to click Express, uninstall everything. Here we have the chipset driver, I believe, uninstalling. It'll probably prompt me for a reboot, but I will go ahead and do that after I uninstall some NVIDIA drivers, and go ahead and remove the catalyst as well too. Finish. At this point, it's asking me to reboot. I'll just say no. I'm going to scroll down and look for NVIDIA drivers, which is our video card here. And again, this is pretty tedious stuff. You can always skip over it. Just basically just doing a little summary rundown of everything I mentioned in the other video. of how to upgrade. I went ahead and already installed the video card driver. Just to summarize, I actually installed a few things. One was a video card driver. Two, the sound card driver was also been removed because this does have a dedicated sound card, and I will be installing another one. Three, also even remove the LAN cards. You can see here a couple of things here were removed, just as a precaution. Move this a little closer here. And also, this board actually does have USB 3 ports, so I went ahead and removed those as well. So I don't believe there's anything else needed to remove other than that. Once a reboot kicks in, the rest of the NVIDIA software will disappear as well too. I'll go ahead and just double check that. And any other little connections you see to old hardware, sound card drivers, chipset drivers, anything else you think it's connected to any old hardware you'll be removing, definitely a good idea to go ahead and remove. Again, in the video I mentioned before about doing this particular method to upgrade to Ryzen, you may very likely need a PS2 mouse since the USB ports may not be working. Definitely the 3.0 ports will not be working, so definitely a good idea to keep that in mind. This board does have a PS2 mouse port, so I should be able to go ahead and install everything else. Before I actually shut everything down, I'm going to make life a little easy for myself and leave any drivers I'm going to need for this board, particularly chipset drivers, on the desktop. So all I got to do is move the mouse over, double click, and we should be good to go. Why easy is actually good, why make things harder for yourself in such a particular method here to install a new chipset and board and CPU. Oh, this thing's always a slight pain to remove, these old school coolers. Using the brackets. And of course you just have to be really careful of these fins on some of these coolers because I've heard stories of them really slicing up some fingers. Might help if I remove the fan cable, because yanking this thing up with that thing still plugged in, you just feel a little confused about what to do next. And there's our CPU, ready to be removed, but I'm probably just going to leave it there since I'll be removing the board anyway. Go ahead and take these screws off here, remove this video card. Since this isn't actually an old school case, this case actually had just regular little screws here. These thumb screws I actually put in myself. You see the blank right there. Basically I had those screws, so I wouldn't be able to actually just finish turning these screws off if I didn't put these thumb screws in. Easier when you're doing this with one hand. Go ahead and ground myself there for a moment. Take this out. And hopefully this will come off without too much of a fight. And there's our video card right here. Go ahead and put that aside as well too. Next we're going to remove this sound card here. Same thing, I also put thumb screws. Kind of funny when your vocabulary gets mixed up when you hear a new word. Old school Audigy 2ZS. Really good card, by the way. One of my old builds, I believe one of my very first computers, after a couple of upgrades, obviously from Pentium 2 and Pentium 4 and whatnot, I was using one of these cards. And unfortunately, it began to suffer from the crack, snapple, and pop sounds that some people were complaining about in forums about with these particular card. So go ahead and removing some cables here. Just leaving it on the side. Got a little decent amount of wire management going on here. You really can't get too much with these old school cases because you don't have the little wire management holes and whatnot all over around the board that make it a lot easier. But I did try a little bit, some Velcro. Some people like to use tie wraps and stuff. I did use that as well. Unplug the fans here. So you can see here I got some Velcro. Go here with the ketchup and mustard cables here. Go ahead and remove a front USB 2 port panel and SATA ports down here. Over time I did replace these SATA cables as well. Do the SATA cables really make a difference? I guess it's really up to you. Leave a comment if you really have some insight or even benchmarking. Have benchmarked in your past to see if cables actually make a difference. Whether it's the old blue or red cables that came with SATA 1 boards, or these new black and white ones that come with boards nowadays. And the most annoying, very old school, is a PC speaker. My friend actually does want to keep this because he does like that beep. I don't think any of my PCs actually have those sounds anymore. Front panel connectors, which are always a pain, but sometimes little coloring stuff, some manufacturers have realized, try to sympathize a little bit with the pain of connecting those things. I believe Asus even had a little front panel like extender, like a little connector that you can connect all your cables to and remove the whole unit if you ever actually did plan to remove your board, which is actually really useful. All these will connect to one little big connector and you would just connect the whole thing back on. Being that's only Asus, I'm not sure if it's too useful to other manufacturers, but I believe more motherboards are now adopting a more universal layout for everything that sometimes you don't even have to look at the book anymore, but that's only in the last few years. Let's go ahead and remove the screws in the board so we can get this out of the way. Close these up. Gotta tell you what a pain it is when these screws fall out of your hands and get lost somewhere. So I'm just gonna go ahead and loosen these and then take them out with a little magnetic screwdriver. There's one. I was always paranoid about using magnetic screwdrivers, but you know, it's not like you're using one of those crazy, highly magnetic, solid pieces of matter that some people like to joke around with on YouTube. So you're not going to kill every component on your board by using a little small one right here. I think that should be it, unless of course we have some more screws, and I don't believe we do. Got a little anti-static bag here, so go ahead and remove this. Try to get the wires out of the way. Oh, I did neglect one little fan cable. Some of these cables here are getting in the way, so I'm just get them out. Plug these SATA cables completely out of the way. And we have full clearance. Here's our new board here. Go ahead and take it out. We won't be needing anything else at the moment. Oh, probably a good idea to use this. We put pinholes all over a nice looking box here. X370 by MSI. Definitely did do a review on this if you're really curious about it. Explain a bunch of details and features that the board has in as much detail as I probably could in a short video. There she is. Go ahead and open this Ryzen 1700 box over here. This case I'll be using the stock cooler, which is actually a really good one. There's our CPU and a little sticker to add to the case now. I'll probably leave all the other ones on there as well too. And here's our stock cooler. It's got an LED light on it as well. I won't be adding any other third-party thermal paste in this case, so I'm just going to be using the paste that's already on, as you can see here. Oh, the plastic thing underneath came off. And that's the wire needed for the LED lighting. So I'll go ahead and install this. And this little CPU installed here. Go ahead and remove this. Sure you've seen this done a gazillion times if you're built PCs before, upgraded stuff. Only thing that so confuses me occasionally is the orientation of this thing, but I think I got it. Little triangles and whatnot, but occasionally you still feel a little nervous about whether or not you got it in the right position or not, so I guess we'll see. Sometimes makes you miss a bracket system that I was just complaining about earlier. As a matter of fact, you can probably see it's still there. This cooler can be pretty easy or a little tricky to install depending how you look at it. You'd think the screws would just be easy. One thing to keep in mind is if you actually remove this cooler while it's in the case, you may have a little issue with the back plate coming off, falling backwards. Good to do this in cross section so everything's pretty evened out. Whoops. You might be asking why I'm doing this actually outside the case. Well, I just got used to actually installing CPUs on their boards before installing them in the case, and I personally find it to be a little easier with the exception of the little rotation of the board I'm just having here randomly. Some people prefer to install it once the board's already on inside the case, but totally a personal preference. And all right, we're all set here. I decided I think I'm going to actually take everything out of this case and give this case a really good cleanup, because well, I actually did clean out the majority of the dust, you know, around the usual places back here, on the bottom, and even a little bit on the front fans. There's still just dust everywhere. This case really hasn't had a good clean for a while, and again, remind you, this case is actually pretty old. So, I'm going to actually remove this I/O panel, by the way. I'm going to actually remove all the fans, the power supply, and everything else, and I'm going to give it a good clean over here. See, I'm just going to go ahead and take these thumb screws as well too, that I've actually installed on my own on this power supply. They originally did have regular screws, but just like the brackets with the video card and the sound card, I put these little thumb screws in just to make it a little easier to take off. Let's be really careful, that power supply is going to take a little tumble down. Go ahead and remove these little wire management velcros I put here some time back. A little easier to manage than tie wraps, because tie wraps obviously you just have to break them off, and you know, there's all that excess tie wrap piece which you didn't really use, and people usually cut it off with a scissor, and then of course the end of that tie wrap is now sharp, which causes for little cuts here and there, which I'm sure you guys experienced once in a while. So I'm just sticking to Velcro for the most part. Take out the SATA cables, remove the plugs for the power supply. Got some more SATA cables here. These are actually shorter SATA cables. Kind of convenient when the board and the drives are really close by. Here's a little tie wrap here. Though this is not a zip tie here that will actually cut you. This one you can just easily fold off and take off. Take all the wire management stuff out. Fan cable from the front. Just before you yank the power supply out, give you an example of a tie wrap that can actually cut you up if you're not careful. Right over there, this particular little tie wrap here was cut, and it's actually, you know, or innocently touch it like this, you're like, no problem, but trust me, that thing can actually cut you, especially if it was cut more at an angle. I think this actually came originally with the power supply. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off and just wrap the whole thing around with a nice little Velcro once I'm done here. I took the back cover off. I'm going to take out these drives here, the 2 DVD drives, and I'll probably remove this whole front panel here as well too. So basically what we have is nice, just a steer bare bone case here, which I'm just going to go ahead and clean up any particular way you think is a good idea. I actually have a few ideas. I'm probably just going to wash it out a little bit. You can see some specks of dust hiding back there as well, and these fans I'm going to go ahead and remove, and believe it or not, I'm going to give them a good wash too. I have washed several fans before. Ooh, touch the blade. I have watched several fans before, including CPU fans. The Zalman cooler, actually, despite being old, looks pretty good, huh? I actually gave it a pretty good wash. There's still little specks of dust here and there, but there's a particular method I use to clean, really deep clean these fans. I'll probably give you a little demonstration in a moment. Hitting the shower, just like I washed that keyboard some time back. Go ahead and take the screw off, remove these drives. It's the last one, actually. Oh, good thing for the magnetic. Push these out. Here's as bare bone as a computer case can get, completely hollow shell here. And these are those two little fans I mentioned I was going to wash that are on the front. Go ahead and clean them up. They actually look pretty good now because of a little dust clean I did earlier, but they still got a little dusty smell, and some of the blades still have a little residue on the fins sides here. So go ahead and knock that out and give this good thing a good scrub down as well too. Give it some time to dry up, and in this case actually it looks really good. I can actually even see partial reflection here on the complete back plate here. Also wash these fans too as well with a little bit of water, using a little paintbrush to clean out the fins a little bit. And some people may agree, as long as you let these little pieces of electronics dry up completely, they work just fine. I didn't submerge it into water, I just basically showered it and let all the dust come out. Use the brush to clean the fins a little bit and try to avoid getting this wet as much as I can, even though obviously the sticker here kind of does the job. This is an old case, so you can actually see some evidence of, you know, aging, whatever you want to call it. Looks a little rusty. This actually does look like dust or fingerprinting, but as you can see, doesn't really change too much. It's just an old steel case. I'd say it's pretty, at least 15 years old, and looking really good actually. I'm actually quite impressed. Got the fans back in, and also the front cover back on as well too. Looking good. Start putting in the board. Got the little I/O bracket here, the new I/O bracket. Don't forget to take the old one out, or even put the new one in before putting in the board, because I'm sure a lot of people will tell you what slight pain in the ass it is to get that thing in once the board's installed at all. Some people like to actually attach this to the board and let the board pressure the I/O bracket back in here, but I just like to put it in myself. Get some memory chips in here. You know, one day I actually did put the memory chips in this first slot here and the third, and it seems like it would be correct as opposed to putting it in the second and the fourth. even though many people will say obviously you should put them the slots further away in a particular order, further away from the CPU. And believe it or not, when I turned the board on, it did give me a message saying that it's not in the optimal positioning. Even though it seemed like they were in dual channel slots, but it did actually give me that little, this particular board did give me that little message. So it told me to go ahead and swap it out, which I corrected. The message disappeared, even though you can actually just ignore it. But I just went ahead and just took care of it. So now I'm just going to stick to these 2 slots. Obviously that is the right way to do it. Very old school power supply. No, don't believe modular power supplies exist, and if they were pretty, probably semi at that point. Sometimes I find plugging these power supply cables in a little cumbersome, but I mean, there's definitely worse. You know which cables I'm actually talking about, which connections to the board, but they're not so bad actually. Looking pretty good here so far. I velcroed up all the cables up here, just a little bit higher, so now the whole board has full clearance here and you can pretty much see everything. Last time you could see the cables were actually like overlapping the board in the corner here. Not much of a big deal, but it does look a little prettier. And any unused cables all velcroed and tie wrapped right behind this little area here, so it's not visible. Now again, there's no see-through side panel here, but when you actually do open it up, it actually looks pretty clean. The only cable sticking out here is the SATA power cables we use for the hard drives. I'll also be using one more cable here, little adapter cable that's going to be plugging in both DVD drives. Trying to keep the wire management thing here going. Brand new SATA cables here. They came with the board, so might as well. Probably sneak these back here and be able to tie wrap them against the unused power cables, wire management, and then snake them underneath to the side of the board where the ports actually are. Old school wire management. A lot of people really didn't take the wire management too seriously in the custom made PCs back then and around this time. They did try, but I guess maybe with the glass panels it became much more popular. In case anyone's wondering why I put the SSD on the little bracket there, well, again, there were no particular slots for SSDs to go into, so I have this little converter here that's also kind of old school in terms of SSDs, since some SSDs used to come with these particular little brackets. Let me get you a little closer view here. So you can actually put these things in a particular slot. As you can see, it looks pretty good right there. Everyone's favorite, plugging in these front panel connectors. Actually, after dealing with this board a number of times, I actually have the positioning pretty memorized, so it's actually not so difficult. Put a little, sorry, that might be a little better. Our front panel connector on this board is right here, and I believe the hard drive and the reset button on the bottom. Of course, now I kind of forgot which one goes first. And the power on and the power switch and the power LED are on top. So let's go ahead and plug these in. I'm gonna have to cheat a little bit as always and read the manual. I want to shed a little light on a little thing here, no pun intended. Well, maybe I am going to put pun because I do have a flashlight bright in here so you can see a little better. This is the power LED. Not necessarily, but it is nice to know have a little light on when your computer is on. And as you can see, this is actually a 3-pin connector. Back then, some of the boards were fitted to actually do a 3-pin connection, and most of the cases had a 3-pin. This particular board here is going to use a 2-pin, which is all the way at the end here, right to the next to the power switch, which is the orange and white cable right here. Putting this cable just right next to it like this. Sorry if my hand is in the way, I use my right hand here. Putting it right next to that, or right there, is not going to work because one of the LEDs will be outside in limbo, as you can see. So there's a little trick here. A lot of people immediately freak out when they see this. I have to admit that, yeah, I actually freaked out and Googled and even saw some adapters on eBay or Amazon that will convert the 3 to a 2-pin. But if you have a little flathead, you can actually just lift this little plastic piece here, which is basically stopping this wire from just coming out. Once you lift this up a little bit, this will slide right out, and then you can just basically jam it into this little section here, making a 2-pin connection. Now, obviously, this piece of plastic will still be overlapping outside, but as you can see, when you plug it in, it will actually be making contact both pins on the board right here, as opposed to the third one being on the little hole here and the third one there. So something to keep in mind if you ever actually do attempt to plug in a modern day board, or even a board from like the last few years, because I remember a board from 2015 had the same issue with me and I had to actually do this particular trick. It can be a bit of a struggle to do that, but using both hands you can see the little pin is out. Probably a little easier. Let me try to clarify this a little bit more. When the pin is in, like this one, probably a little easier to get like a little flathead, whoops, underneath this little plastic flap right above the metal. You're going to have to push this thing a little bit to kind of give you the little bit of space there. You really can't see it, unfortunately, but you can see there's a little bit of leeway if you move this back and forth. So when it's all the way in the back position, it's kind of blocking any space you'll need to actually even get a little bit of a edge hold on that. So if you push it forward, you'll see it does have a little space to actually get under the clip. Now, obviously, it doesn't need to lift up completely. Once you have the pin there, you can actually just pull this out, and you get this little thing here, and then right there, I'm going to push this in here. And you can see we now have a little 2-pin connector. You can see the rear fan here has changed. I actually was able to replace it with a larger 140mm fan, so I took out those 2 fans. Well, actually there was only one, though it was capable of 2 80mm fans, but I took it out and replaced it with a bigger 140mm fan. So this definitely should have better airflow, taking all that hot air out. Got 2 fans in the front that'll be plugging in here as well too. Decent little intake, and probably be plugging one of these up here and one down here. This board definitely has a number of fan plugs. I believe 2 here, 1 here, another one there, I believe, and obviously one over here that I just plugged in a moment ago. Of course, the CPU fan's up there as well too. Do a little wire management on those cables there. I went ahead and took out this bracket from up here already. I decided, even though it's a little unusual, to put the dedicated sound card on this little PCI Express X1 slot up here. Basically this little card right here that I mentioned earlier, dedicated sound card. This is a full view of it. Kind of like it when the connection is actually like gold colored like that. It looks pretty nice from the outside. Little optical connection there too. And then we shall put the video card on. Let's go ahead and focus that a little bit. There we go. Video card in this slot here, which is a 2-slot video card. And kind of leaving the whole area down here, unless of course there's an IRQ conflict and whatnot. Should leave everything down here pretty clear. Let's go ahead and put this one card in here. I wonder how many of you actually use a dedicated sound card as opposed to using the onboard one. Shoot a comment, let me know which card actually you like. Personally, on my own, one of my own systems, I actually do use a Asus card, dedicated sound card, as opposed to using the onboard. I have to admit, even though integrated sound cards have definitely come a long way over the last few years, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I still continue to actually use a dedicated sound card. Though you have to admit, there is a difference depending on what card you use. I am looking forward to seeing how the sound on this card is. There we go. It's nice and tightened up. Pretty solid. I know some of you are probably wondering, gee, Ed, you're installing cards while the computer's positioned this way. Gravity's not really going to help you here. Well, it's been done by a lot of people. Shouldn't be a problem here. Even though the video card will probably be a little troublesome, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot once I pull this little lever out here. And we have contact. Okay, seals in. Go ahead and grab some of those thumb screws from earlier. I usually like to put them in just a little bit so it gets a little grip, and then we'll go ahead and actually screw the whole thing in. I'll probably try to do both of them actually, to be honest. Very interesting sounds to hear on a steel case, huh? Video card sagging a little bit makes me nervous. Especially the really long ones, 1080s and every other longer card that's been that can reach pretty much from over here to over there. 950 cards, 1050 cards actually pretty small. I'm not even going to be using a external power source from the power supply connected here, so that's actually good. Looking pretty good. Both cards installed. I got to put in that blank that I took out earlier, put it down there. But everything looks pretty solid. I think we can probably boot this computer up. Get a little closer view there for you. Even on an old case like this, it's still possible to do some really good wire management if you really have an open mind, and definitely some time to do it, obviously. I personally think it's a little easier to really manage the wiring on these old cases, starting from scratch. It's something I should probably do in one of my old cases as well too, which I'll probably definitely demonstrate in another video. I actually own one of my cases that is actually from 2003, 2004, and I've actually had it for a really long time. All aluminum case, and love the color. Pretty easy to clean, but like I said, wire management is obviously not as great or efficient as newer cases these days. So starting from scratch sometimes really helps, and as shown here, after ripping everything out, washing the whole case, it's looking pretty good. And if you compare it to how it was earlier, it definitely looks quite a bit better. I'm gonna go ahead and start plugging some cables in, boot this up. As you can see here, I already have my PS2 mouse plugged in. I also have this little wireless adapter for the usual little keyboard here, which I'll be using to just get into the BIOS and do a couple of little changes before officially booting into Windows. So after that, we'll go ahead and install the chipset drivers, do a reboot, and we should be good to go. Probably just other little drivers need to be installed as well too, especially this dedicated sound card, and the video drivers of course, and the LAN driver, and a couple of more things too. So let's go ahead and give this a boot up. Always the anticipation. Just gonna hit the delete key. Looks like we have picture. And the message saying that, everything's changed, which is actually good. So I'll just hit F1. And our familiar BIOS screen over here. So this is definitely good news. Seems like, let's go to advanced mode here as well. Try to pull back a little bit. Sorry about that. Click on the hardware monitor, see if my fans are both there. And yes, the fans are indeed there, so that's working good. Let me just put this down here, aim up. And we'll set up our boot device to be our Intel drive. So let's go ahead and enter here. It is obviously picking up the secondary mechanical hard drive as a boot device. We're just gonna go ahead and touchpad's a little harder to play with, so we'll just go ahead and click on SSD, go ahead and disable this, go back to boot, and for the time being I will disable everything else as a main boot device. Alright, so our main boot device is the Intel SSD, and we'll go ahead and give it a boot. See how it goes. Yes, summary of everything. Fans are a little noisy, as you can hear. Now, I didn't do any other changes like memory speed or anything like that. I'll take care of all that after we're actually booted into the OS and whatnot. Post screen. Not sure why this is here. Not sure if I shut down this computer improperly before ripping everything out. Whoa! Did I just see that correctly? I think we just blue screened. Oh, we might have a problem now. Something's not working correctly. So, I'm sure it's going to happen again. Oh. This time nothing's coming up. Computer's still on. I could have sworn that BSOD had said something about... Actually, I completely missed it. This looks familiar. I think I might know what might be causing the problem. Sometime back when I was playing around with ECC DDR3 memory, jumping in from a server class computer to a regular desktop, I was beginning to see symptoms like this. Even though the machine posts and you can get into the BIOS, the OS wasn't booting up or it would start blue screening on me for some reason. Either a bad combination of memory chips or something else. And then usually when you have memory issues, the computer start beeping at you, it won't boot up, or some other funny combination of error messages that you'll see, and depending what brand motherboard or even computer you're using. I know Lenovo's like to sing a little jingle to you, Dell's will just beep at you. So I'm starting to suspect maybe these memory chips are not really too compatible with the Ryzen CPU at the moment. A BIOS update might actually help that, but I was thinking, in case I ever have an issue with incompatible DDR4 memory, there is a backup plan. Before I go ahead and actually change the memory from a spare system I actually have here, let me go ahead and upgrade the BIOS, because I do know two new versions of BIOS. Then right after this one, actually over here, if you see a date from March of this year, two newer versions actually did mention improved memory compatibility. So if the memory is the cause of this little BSOD dilemma, I'll go ahead and just go ahead and upgrade the BIOS from a little thumb drive. Computer just shut off. Now, I know a lot of people, BIOS upgrades are like, ugh, it's kind of freaky stuff. I've actually done a lot on many PCs over the years. It's not the worst case scenario. It's not the most scariest thing to do. I mean, maybe back in 2000, I remember updating an 8-bit motherboard BIOS system there, and just for it to recognize my 40 gigabyte hard drive, and yeah, that was definitely a new thing right there. So let's go ahead and click this. You can see definitely it's a more recent BIOS version from July, and yeah, why not? You can watch this progress. I've updated the BIOS on all the X370 boards I've had, so I did initially plan to do this after I was pretty much done with everything else. Thought I'd go ahead and just give it a shot now, see if the memory is indeed the cause of our little BSODs over here. There are a couple of ways to actually really see if the memory is incompatible, because like I said, the machine did look like it was going to boot up once the OS began to kick in, poof. Now, I'm only speculating here. The symptoms I did see kind of point to the memory. I do have the backup plan just in case, but let's see if this actually does a trick. One pretty easy way to tell, especially if an OS is not booting up, if a memory is incompatible, is actually try to load up Windows setup, either 7, 8, or 10. Even trying to get into the Windows setup, you might receive a BSOD and probably give the same error that we just saw earlier. And if that happens, indeed, you have some hardware incompatibility, or might even be another issue going on there. Power sum was complete here. Here's the backup plan over here, some DDR4 memory chips that I took out of an Intel-based system. And if it is indeed a compatibility issue that those chips do not work with AMD Ryzen, and there's always been this questions whenever we're looking at DDR4 memory chips, I'll just go ahead and swap these two with those and just put the other two chips into the Intel-based system, which obviously if it doesn't work with Ryzen, it'll work with Intel. Unless, of course, I have bad chips. You'll see that the motherboard went ahead and rebooted, getting ready to enter the BIOS, so let's go ahead and get ready to hit the delete key if it's going to post up. And you can see everything has been put back into the original settings. All my boot settings are gone, which is normal. And let's go ahead and, yep, indeed you can see the BIOS is now at the latest update. 16 gigs of RAM are being picked up. Let's go back here again. Kind of like this particular setting view than the other one. Obviously this is easy mode advanced. So I'm just going to set up all the stuff here again and give this thing a reboot. Ready to try again. Let's go ahead and save the settings. Going back out. Double reboot again. Kind of makes you think it just blue screen there, but trust me, it didn't blue screen and reboot that fast. No way. Wow. Check that out, guys. A BIOS update solved our problems here. Sorry if that's not focusing correctly, but you can see here all the devices for the new AMD chipset and Ryzen CPU and all that other good stuff. PCI subsystem, I don't know what else it is that gets picked up here. I mean, a gazillion things is slowly starting to be picked up. So after giving the system a moment to pick up all those drivers and at prompting for a reboot, we get back here again. Kind of weird and a little odd that the screen, the resolution was actually optimal for the monitor, but now it's like back to the big size stuff as if you just installed the video card for the first time. So you do see all the unknown stuff here, so I'm just going to go ahead and install the chipset driver and get this going, which I believe I left on the desktop. Yep, there we go. Here are all our drivers. Some of the stuff we won't be using, we obviously will not be using the onboard audio driver. Some applications, I put everything here basically, but we'll be needing 1, 2, and 3 as well too. So I'll go ahead and install these and give it a couple of reboots. Got all the chipset drivers and USB drivers installed, so you can see everything seems to be working okay. Got internet connection down there obviously. Was able to do a couple of updates, and if anyone's wondering about new processor being blocked into Ryzen, there's a link in my description to actually bypass that, and that was already installed, so I'm not seeing that unsupported processor / hardware error message getting in my way. And you can see that I even actually went ahead and increased the memory speed to, well, I didn't actually put it at 3000, I'm just testing it out at 2933 for now. Then I'll probably shoot it up to 3000, the speed that this memory actually does use. And again, the BIOS update did solve this one. You can actually see here I'm still using the same 2 memory chips and running that almost at speed. Everything else seems to be working pretty solid. The fans are a little quieter now. And I got this little red LED theme going here, even though obviously these colors on the CPU and everything else you can go ahead and change. This one's obviously just built in, so I won't be able to change that. The upgrade seems like it's gone pretty well. At some point in the future, I'm going to upgrade this power supply. There's an occasional coil whine that I'm actually hearing from it, which may not be a healthy thing. So anyway, this upgrade looks like it's been successful. Pretty clean job here. Won't be needing this anymore. As we can see, the keyboard is working just fine on USB 3 or whichever port I plugged it into. So I think we're good to go here. Again, the wire management actually worked out much better than I thought in the old 2002 case. Really, really amazing. So it definitely shows that even a newer motherboard and CPU can actually really run pretty well on an old case. You know, it'll definitely be quieter once I cover this whole thing up. Oh, power supply has some blue lighting in there. Almost forgot about that. Here's the computer now with the cover back on and all set to go. I'll probably go ahead and put the little Ryzen sticker right here as opposed to taking all these stickers off. So, still looks like a sleeper PC, but really can't tell how pretty good this computer runs and the potential it has now too. So I'm really happy how this project worked out. If you really enjoyed this video, go ahead and shoot a like and subscribe for sure. I'll definitely be shooting more videos up, and I hope you enjoyed this. You really think I was going to leave a floppy disk drive on this computer? Ah, that looks much better, doesn't it? Nice USB 3 ports and audio ports. Fits the color too.